The seats are all jacked up. It completely smelled like weed and bad decisions on the inside. Walk around and look at the back. It looked like it had had a pit maneuver done on it at some point. This car had definitely been chased by the police. So if you think about really weird, cannonball type events and cars that should not be associated with any kind of cannonball activity, the Musketball was a great example of it. And for the same reasons, I thought it would be great to run a full-size pickup truck in a cannonball route. The Musketball was just awesome when Ficarra came out with it. And so the rules for the Musketball were the cars had to be less than 100 horsepower at the wheels, and this huge handicap of how we were going to run from Darien, Connecticut to the Portofino. So, of course, find out about this event. Like everybody else, now the challenge is how do you figure out the best less than 100 horsepower car to do this with? So I spent about 5 minutes on this and came up with a Saturn. And so since I'm a GM guy and been pretty loyal to them, and one of my good friends is a GM master technician, helped me with the truck, I knew he could work on a Saturn. So I start to shop for Saturns. When I started to look into it, the reason I thought about a Saturn was, again, if you don't finish the race, you have no chance of winning the race. So the great thing about Saturns is they're still on the road today. Like you start to shop for them in Marketplace, these are all 250, 300,000 mile cars, and people are still driving them to work every day. So I thought the reliability would just be fantastic. And so I start to shop for a Saturn, started to look at some different cars that were around me. I was living in the Midwest at the time. And first thing I found was a 5-speed blue 4-door car. And so team names are important in these kind of events. And to show my age a little bit, we were going to be Team Blue Thunder. And so pick the car up, start to go through it, get it on the rack, and it's a Midwest car, so it's rotted out from underneath. Kind of really wasn't quite sure this car was going to make it. So I start to shop again, and I find this glorious 97 4-door SL2, but it's an automatic. But it is honestly a car that this little old lady had purchased new out of Chicago. Only drove it to church on Sundays. She's finally in her 90s. They won't let her drive anymore. So this car has about 99,000 miles on it, and it's well taken care of. So that becomes the Musketball car. Because it was this glorious shade of seafoam green from the 90s, the team name became the Flying Pistachio to pay homage to this car. And we start to go through the normal Cannonball-ish builds for as much as a $2,500 car can stomach. So we put a little fuel cell in the back, start to do some different things, wire up radar detectors, all the normal things. But you can't really do too much to these cars because the electrical system just can't handle a lot of it. And so we get closer to the date and we're doing some of the final prep, do all the maintenance on the car. And because it was an automatic, it didn't have as good of an overdrive gear in it. So we put a little bit taller tires on the car. So the little car almost looks like a 4-wheel drive, but we wanted to help keep the RPMs down over the distance. So we put some taller tires on it. As we get closer to the event, the person I was going to drive with had a conflict. No big deal. I'd done events by myself before, so now I'm going to solo this Saturn. We show up in Darien, and now you have to be ready for the dyno day. Well, in preparation for this, I didn't want to turn up with an overpowered car and face penalties. So I called my buddy Steve Peterson and said, hey, look, we're going to get the Saturn dynoed. Well, there's a race shop nearby. And I called this race shop and said, hey, can you do dyno tests for me? And they said, sure. And I drive up in this seafoam green Saturn, and everybody just starts laughing and giggling like, what are you doing? And so I start to break it down and explain it to them. Now they're having a great time. And I've got these awesome videos of this little Saturn strapped to a dyno, and it's screaming through the gears, and it comes in at 97 horsepower at the wheels. So I'm golden. Pack the car up and we go to Connecticut. So take off on the Musketball, and I should have spent much more time researching better less than 100 horsepower cars because, of course, the diesel Volkswagens dominated. But we're running along on the event, and we're getting into Oklahoma, and we're on the overnight leg. And the little Saturn is running like a sewing machine. She is just purring along. Now, the problem is that car can't go over 100 miles an hour unless it was dropped out the back of an airplane. But it's given me everything she's got. She's pegging right at triple digits. We're crossing over Texas, Oklahoma. Middle of the night, it's just clear. Everybody's just kind of cruising along. And I'm just trying to keep up. I'm kind of a mid-pack at this point, but the little car's running well. But because I was running it so hard, I was going to have to make an extra gas stop. I was burning through fuel a little bit faster. Well, if you've ever been on the tollway in Oklahoma, there's these kind of Oasis style gas stations. And so they're in the middle of the interstate. And so I figured that's going to be a good time. I'll do one more top up. I'll have to get fuel again before we get to Los Angeles. So it's about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I pull off. It's a left exit to get into the Oasis area. And I immediately missed the automotive entrance to the gas pumps. So I'm on the truck side of this service station. And of course, because it's the middle of the night, there's about 40 semis that are pulled in. It's just a row of trailers. But I'd been there before, so I can see the glow of where the gas pumps are. So I'm just going to go around and come in kind of through the exit, but get back to where the automotive gas pumps are. So I'm kind of tooling along, looking, and going past these trailers. And I finally see the last trailer. And I just whipped the steering wheel to the left to get back into the gas pumps. What I didn't know was that there was a concrete island at the end of this row of tractor trailers. So it was a full moon that night. And so when I whip the steering wheel, I hear this horrendous bang, and all of a sudden the moon is in the windshield of the car where it's not supposed to be. The front wheels have come off the ground, and I'm jumping this little concrete island, Dukes of Hazzard style, into the gas station area. I feel the frame drag across the concrete, and the back tires slam down, and the car just rolls to the gas pumps. And luckily nobody's around. And I'm thinking, great, I've destroyed this car in Oklahoma. And so I pull it up to the gas pumps, shut it off, start to put fuel in the car, and I'm looking, and all 4 tires have air in them. The bumper's still on the front of the car. Because honestly, I think the taller tires that we put on the car saved it, right? It gave it a little bit higher ride height. So I pop the hood on the car, and I take a look through the engine bay. I'm looking at the front suspension. There's nothing hanging off. Kind of look under the car. There's nothing hanging off of the car. Finish fuel in the car, get back in it. The car starts back up. I start to roll the car towards the entrance ramp, get it up to speed. Nothing's wobbling. I take my hands off the steering wheel. The car is tracking straight. Somehow I've survived this mishap. Take off again. It's now daylight the next day. I'm coming into Kingman, Arizona. Like, this is now going to be the last fuel stop before I get to Los Angeles. So real quick, no big deal. I'm going to pull in, top the car up. I'm going to make it to the Portofino. Stop, fuel the car up. I'm getting back onto the interstate. And as I turn the wheel to the left, this horrible clatter comes out. And the car starts shaking, and I can tell the driver's side tire is getting into the fender. Something's gone really wrong. So I limp the car to the next exit, pull it off, and the wheel is just thrown out. And I get under the car and look, and what I didn't know had happened in Oklahoma was that when I jumped the curb, there is a stabilizer bar under the car that ties into the suspension, and I'd sheared the bolts off of it. And so where one of them comes into the driver's side control arm, that nut had just sheared off. So somehow from Oklahoma to Kingman, Arizona, that car had held itself together until I made the harder turn to come back onto the interstate, and then it all just came apart. Luckily, this gas station has a big parking lot in the back, so now I got to figure out what to do. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon. It's a weekday. The first thing I've got to do is figure out how to get to the Portofino, because even though your car's down, you're still expected to be there. You still need to finish. So I call, and I need to find a car. So I call one of the local rental car places, one of the national brands at the airport, and the guy says, look, man, I don't have any cars, and we're getting ready to close at 5. And so I said, look, do you have anybody in this town that rents cars? And he goes, well, look, there's this little kind of buy here, pay here lot. They rent cars. You might want to call them. So I get their information, call them up. This lovely young lady answers. And I said, ma'am, I've got to get to Los Angeles. Can you rent me a car? And she goes, yeah, we can rent you a car. And I said, well, how late are you open? And she goes, we're open till 6. I was like, fantastic. I'll be there shortly. So then now I've got to do something with the car. I find a little shop right down Route 66, a couple miles away, call this guy up, tell him what's happened. I said, look, man, can I get the car towed to you? Can you sort the car out for me? Guy was super nice. He goes, yeah, man, absolutely. Get it over here. We'll take a look at it tomorrow. So perfect. Then I find a tow truck company. Now I've got to get to the buy here, pay here lot so that I can rent a car. So I find a tow truck company, asked him how much. He said, $75, I'll take your car to this shop. I said, fair enough. There's $100 in the glove box and the keys are inside. Can you just get this car, to the shop? He's like, no problem. Now I've got to find a taxi company in Kingman, find one. You got to get me to this buy here, pay here lot. Taxi shows up. I run over to the buy here, pay here lot. Young lady again was super awesome. She basically brings up a rental contract on a Word document, show her my driver's license, gave her a credit card, said, look, I need the car for about 2 days. I'll be back. So she hands me the keys and I walk out front and it's a Nissan Altima. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the stereotypes that come around Nissan Altimas, but this car was the stereotypical Nissan Altima. I get in the car and start it. The seats are all jacked up. It completely smelled like weed and bad decisions on the inside. Walk around and look at the back. It looked like it had had a pit maneuver done on it at some point. This car had definitely been chased by the police, but it ran and drove. So I take off, I make it to the Portofino. Have a great time. Everybody's there, have a nice little party. We hang out. It's now the next day. Everybody's starting to leave to go home. I've got to go sort out the Saturn. So I drive the Nissan Altima back to Kingman, Arizona. I get there kind of midday. The parts still haven't shown up for the car, but they're assuring me that they are. Call the taxi company, same taxi driver, picks me up from the buy here, pay here lot. I get the Altima returned. She's super cool, really nice people. Now I'm hanging out at this shop that's got about 3 or 4 employees on Route 66. They were so awesome. Let me hang out at the shop. I'm talking to them all day, literally sitting on a curb waiting for parts while the Saturn's up on jack stands in their parking lot. Finally, the parts come in at right at 5 o'clock. And these guys were so awesome. They stayed late. They said, no problem. We're going to get you on the road today. They throw the parts into the Saturn, get it running. It's good to go. And so now I'm driving out of Kingman and I'm coming to the interstate. And at this point, it's either I can go to the right and go home or I can go to the left and go to the Portofino. So I call my wife really quick just to let her know I'm back on the road. Everything's okay. And I remember she asked me, she said, are you going east or are you going west? And I sat there and thought for a minute, and this poor little Saturn that had just performed so well and really had no place being in a Cannonball event and had gotten 5-6 hours away from the Portofino, I felt like it deserved a win. So I said, I'm going west. And so I make a left onto the interstate and I drive it to the Portofino. I get there about a little bit after midnight. And there's a couple people still there, and they're out there cheering and celebrating and clapping for the little Saturn to make it. But I'll always remember that as my favorite event, because taking something that has no business being in a coast-to-coast competitive event, that little car shined.
When you get a ticket, it might look something like this, but the first thing that you need to do is take a picture of that ticket and send it to 305-305. That will get the ticket clinic on your case immediately. They've got brick and mortar offices in Georgia, Florida, and California, but they can help you find a ticket no matter where you get it in the United States by helping you find a local attorney that will do everything they can to help you avoid costly fines, insurance premium increases, points on your license, risk of suspension, even jail time. They've helped me out with this ticket and many others, and a lot of my friends as well. So check them out now at the link in the description below, or again, text your ticket to 305-305 to get the ticket clinic on your case. They are the perfect partner in your fight against any speeding ticket.